Hello, everybody. Peter B. again. And today I want to talk about the O'Connell Dolan scandal. Probably many of you, including myself until recently, never heard of the O'Connell Dolan scandal. It happened in 1924, and in everyone's mind was the Black Sox throwing the 1919 World Series to the Reds and the hiring of Commissioner Keenan Mountain Landis, and how he banned the 8 Black Sox players as well as other players, and he really clamped down on the morals involved in baseball. That was still on everyone's mind. So it's very strange that this happened shortly after in 1924. Now, I want to warn you, I'm going to be talking for a little while. If you want to skip to the end where I show cards of all the players involved, be my guest. Otherwise, follow along, and I'm sure you will learn, just like I learned, about the 1924 O'Connell Dolan scandal. I got most of this from blog excerpts from, I cannot say his last name, Jerry Karadowski. I found that on the web, as well as from Saber. I just rearranged stuff, wrote some of my own words, but most of the info is directly from them. Okay, here we go. Baseball Commissioner Keenan Mountain Landis sat behind his desk in the suite at New York's Waldorf, Austria, and stared disbelievingly at the young man standing opposite him. His name was Jimmy O'Connell, the 23-year-old outfielder of the New York Giants. And that's him right there in your frame. The Giants shelled out a princely $75,000 for him a few years before, and after a shaky rookie year, O'Connell found his stride in the last month of his sophomore season, hitting the ball at a .350 clip to help New York clinch the pennant. For all intents and purposes, it appeared that Jimmy O'Connell was at the beginning of an outstanding big league career. And that's what made the story O'Connell had just told Landis seem even more astonishing. Moments earlier, the husky blonde ball player with a wide smile explained in detail how he offered a player on the opposing team $500 bribe to throw a ball game. All right, now let's get some first background on young Jimmy O'Connell. Jimmy grew up in California. It was Sacramento circa 1906, and his father, James O'Connell, was head of a respectable middle-class family. The O'Connell family were devout Roman Catholics, and they made it a point of pride never to miss a Sunday Mass. However, Jimmy was omitting a couple of commandments he learned in Sunday school. Honor thy father and thy mother, aka obey your parents and other authority figures, and thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor, aka don't lie. First time Jimmy's father noticed his son blatantly disobeying him was the morning he started school. That first day, James walked the boy to the school, but shortly afterwards, Jimmy reappeared at the O'Connell house. On the walk back to the schoolhouse, James explained that Jimmy needed to stay in school until he was dismissed by his teacher. He watched carefully to make sure Jimmy re-entered the schoolhouse and then walked again back home. Soon, Jimmy showed up at the O'Connell's front door again. James took his son in hand and once again retraced the route to the schoolhouse. On the way, James explained with a little bit more firmness that Jimmy must stay in school until dismissed by his teacher. The boy nodded his head and walked into the school. This time, instead of returning home, James hid behind a tree and waited. After a few minutes, Jimmy came bounding back outside. James stepped out from behind the tree and, as was custom of the era, spanked his boys behind all the way back to the schoolhouse. Then, instead of leaving Jimmy, James accompanied his son to the classroom in front of all the students and gave him a few more whacks to his rump for good measure. It wasn't something James enjoyed doing, but the swift punishment did the trick. From that point on, Jimmy obeyed authority figures without question. As far as not lying, James noticed Jimmy's childish fibs quickly growing from occasional fanciful tale into multiple untruths a day. When a firm hand did not put an end to Jimmy's propensity for fibbing, James changed tack. One afternoon, he brought home a framed lithograph print of the first president of the United States, George Washington. James hung it in the family dining room above the buffet where no one could escape George's stern gaze. Now, every kid knows the old story of young George Washington chopping down his father's cherry tree, and then, when confronted by his father, he replied, "I cannot tell a lie, I did cut it down with my hatchet." Washington's father embraced him and told his boy that his honesty was worth more than 1,000 trees. To impress Jimmy's mind that he should never tell lies, James would point to the picture and recite, "That's the first president of the United States who never told a lie in his life. Whenever you're tempted to fib, remember George Washington." With that, James never had to worry about his youngest telling him anything but God's honest truth, no matter how comfortable it was. With those two commandments now straightened out, firmly ingrained in his mind, young Jimmy O'Connell embarked on childhood full of fun and sports. In high school, Jimmy played outfield on his school team, a good student with a gift for mathematics. Jimmy was given a scholarship to the University of Santa Clara. In 1920, he was signed by the San Francisco Seals of the Pacific Coast League. His first season playing at that level, just below the major leagues, Jimmy batted a creditable .262. However, by the next season, he found his stride, batting .337 with 17 homers. The New York Giants bought Jimmy's contract for the outrageous sum of $75,000. The Giants wanted him to play in the outfield, so the club allowed him to remain with San Francisco for 1922 while he made the adjustment. Jimmy hit .335 with 13 homers, and then the Giants called their 75,000 beauty home to New York for 1923. Like most young players who came with a high price tag, scrutiny by press and fans was tremendous. Jimmy faltered under the pressure and hit only .250 as backup first baseman and outfielder. Now, the Giants were a dynasty club stocked with a score of future Hall of Famers, led by the feisty John McGraw. The Giants were notoriously hard on rookies, and Jimmy, being a high-priced kid from the West Coast, meant he faced some serious ribbing by the veterans. Jimmy's eager pleasure to please personally made him the hapless butt of many clubhouse pranks. He started off 1924 playing in a manner many thought unbefitting of his $75,000 sticker price. However, as the dog days of summer wore on, the Giants began suffering injuries to many of their starters. Here's where the $75,000 paid dividends. At the end of August, Jimmy stepped in as a regular center fielder and hit .302 in 11 games. As the pennant race with Brooklyn tightened in September, Jimmy hit .349 for the month. Then came the last series of the season against Philadelphia, which led to his conversation with Keenshaw Mountain Landis and his complete banishment from baseball. It was the last series of 1924 season. The New York Giants needed one win from Philadelphia to clinch the pennant over the Brooklyn Dodgers. The Phillies were the worst team in the league, and the Giants could expect to win at least one of the two scheduled games. However, Giants have suffered a series of injuries to several of their regulars. Still, New York seemed a lock to clinch, but baseball had a funny way of throwing an unexpected curve. O'Connell explained to Landis, and that's the commissioner, Judge Kenesaw Mountain Landis, accompanied Landis for a few hours before the first game against the Phils. He was in the dressing room. The locker adjacent to his belonged to Giants coach Al Cozy Dolan. Here's Al Cozy Dolan. Dolan was a veteran outfielder who bounced around the majors for a decade, earning a reputation as a popular and funny character in the clubhouse. After his playing days ended, he coached the Giants, and there he became John McGraw's assistant and all-around yes man. His popularity with the players waned when McGraw began using him to snoop and do dirty work like hotel bed checks. One newspaper said he was the first to laugh at McGraw's jokes and the last to cease. But like him or not, Cozy Dolan was McGraw's man, and the players obeyed him as if McGraw himself was talking. And here is Mr. John McGraw. As O'Connell pulled on his cleats, Dolan sided up and asked if he knew Phillies shortstop Heine Sand. And here is Heine Sand. O'Connell told Dolan he did indeed know Sand, and the two had played together in the Pacific Coast League. Go out on the field, Dolan said, and tell Sand not to bear down on us this afternoon. Tell him there'll be $500 in it for him. O'Connell asked where was the $500 coming from, to which Dolan said that the rest of the team was subscribing to it. To O'Connell, this meant all his teammates were in on it. After Dolan walked away, his teammate, Ross Pep Young, approached. What did Dolan say to you? Youngs asked, to which O'Connell replied, to offer Sand $500 not to bear down against the Giants. Youngs then told O'Connell, go to it then. Ross Youngs was a superstar in the 1920s and a well-respected veteran and one of the manager John McGraw's favorites. This exchange with one of the team stars added legitimacy to Dolan's request. O'Connell then went out onto the field where he approached second baseman Frankie Fritsch. Like Youngs, Frisch was one of the McGraw's favorites. O'Connell told Frisch what Dolan said and asked him to do. Give him anything he wants, was Frisch's reply. At that point, Heine Sand and the rest of the Phillies were on the field warming up. O'Connell walked over to third base area where Heine Sand was and turned to Sand and asked, what does your club think about the Giants winning the pennant? Why, I hope the best club wins, Jimmy. O'Connell shook his head. No, that's not it. How do you fellows feel towards us winning the pennant? Well, said San, I would like you to win, being you're a friend of mine. How do the other boys feel about it? O'Connell asked. I don't know. Well, I would like to see it end up with us taking 2 games from you and Brooklyn beating Boston 2 games, where a tie would come in. O'Connell replied, Hell, we don't want to play Brooklyn. San retorted, Well, that is the way I would like to see it finished, and in my guess, all the rest of the boys would too. Would $500 change your opinion, Heine? O'Connell asked, explaining that Cozy Dolan was in on it. Do the rest of the Giants know about this? Sand asked. Sure, Frisch, Kelly, and Youngs understand. Sand's face registered a look of disgust. Jimmy, I am not interested. All right, Heine, said O'Connell. This is just between you and I. It needn't go any further. Go out there and do your best. O'Connell then walked towards home plate where the Giants were taking batting practice. One of the players standing around the batting cage was George High Pockets Kelly. Kelly was another well-respected veteran. When O'Connell reached for the cage, Kelly asked, What did Sam say? O'Connell told him that Sam would not do it. After a while, O'Connell walked over to the Giants' dugout where Cozy Dolan was sitting alone on the bench. What did Sam say? He asked. He will not do it, O'Connell replied. Nothing more was said between the two, and the game began. O'Connell had a double in 4 at-bats, and Sam went 0 for 3 with a walk, scoring the Phillies' only run as the Giants won 5-1. Meanwhile, in Boston, the Braves beat Brooklyn 3-2, officially giving the Giants the National League pennant. That night, the image of Buck Weaver kept rolling around Heine Sand's mind. Weaver was the third baseman on the 1919 Chicago White Sox, and as the story went, he had known about but refused to take part in the World Series fix. Because he failed to rat out the other conspirators, Commissioner Landis threw him out of the game as well. Now all Sand could think about was that he was just been thrust into the same position as Buck Weaver in 1919. Shortly before midnight, Sand knocked on Phillies manager Art Fletcher's hotel room door. Although initially foggy from being woke up, Fletcher was soon boiling with rage at what Sand told him. Despite the hour, Fletcher dialed National League President John Hadler and told him he had something important he needed to discuss, but not on the telephone. The two met for breakfast the next day, Sunday, September 28th. After breakfast, Hadler telephoned Commissioner Keenshaw Mountain Landis in Chicago. Landis was scheduled to take the train to Washington for the first game of the World Series, but changed his ticket to an overnighter to New York. After a meeting with John Hadler, Landis summoned Giants owner Horace Stoneham, as well as manager John McGraw. Both men denied any knowledge of O'Connell and Dolan's proposition to Sand. That's when Landon summoned O'Connell to his suite at the Waldorf Astoria. After Landis questioned O'Connell, he called in Cozy Dolan. If O'Connell's frankness had shocked him, what Cozy Dolan did next took Landis' shock to the next level. To every one of O'Connell's allegations, Dolan replied that he could not remember. Not that he didn't do it, but that he couldn't remember anything. Landis was taken back by Dolan's odd way of answering, repeatedly asking him why he could not remember anything from just a few days earlier. And conditionally, instead of saying O'Connell was lying, all Dolan would say is that he could not remember. This bizarre blanket answer infuriated the commissioner, who probably began to wonder if Dolan even remembered how he came to arrive at this hotel room. Landis called in Ross Young before him. Youngs denied ever talking with O'Connell about the $500. Frankie Frisch came next. And he too denied talking to O'Connell about the $500, and even went so far as to suggest that if it did happen, it was a joke. Next, the commissioner called in Heine Sand. The Phillies shortstop more or less corroborated O'Connell's story from how he was approached and the amount offered to flat-out refusal and witnessing O'Connell walk back to the batting cage after their discussion. Last one to face the commissioner was High Pockets Kelly. And, like Youngs and Frisch, he denied ever talking with O'Connell about the $500 or any knowledge of a fix. With the World Series about to begin, and the press likely to catch wind of the affair, Landis acted fast. He immediately gave O'Connell a lifetime suspension, since he admitted on record that he attempted to bribe Heine Sand. Cozy Dolan received a lifetime suspension because his answers were suspicious, in the least, and damning at the most. Young's, Frisch, and Kelly's stories seemed to match, and considering there was no further evidence, the trio was acquitted of any wrongdoing. Ross Youngs, Frankie Frisch, High Pockets Kelly went on to play the 1924 World Series, and all three will eventually be inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame. The scandal, dubbed the O'Connell-Dolan affair, earned from headlines such as "The World's Dumbest Rookie," his almost surreal honesty and astonishing naivety in the whole mess has completely baffled historians since 1924. So, did O'Connell do it on his own? He did plead guilty. There's just no way a French player would take it upon himself to commit a bribe on his own. Did Dolan think of the idea? Well, he definitely was the key person involved. But how would he come up with the $500? He just orchestrated the bribe. Oop. I forgot to put up this guy. Dolan. Did John McGraw have part in this? He said he knew nothing, but 16 years earlier, John McGraw and his Giants lost the pennant in the last days of 1908 season when they were defeated 3 times in 1 week by the Philadelphia Phillies. Maybe McGraw didn't want the past to repeat itself. What about future Hall of Famers? Frisch, Kelly, and Young. Were they involved? O'Connell kept to the story that all three talked to him about it. Sand also mentioned he watched O'Connell walk back to the batting cage, where Kelly was. But it was O'Connell's word against theirs without any evidence. The New York Giants went on to play the Washington Senators in the 1924 World Series and lost in 7 games. Frisch, Kelly, Young, and McGraw all went into the Hall of Fame. Sand's career went for the worse, as the next year he was booed everywhere he played and was called a squealer. He faded out of baseball in 6 years. Cozy Dolan was out of job in the only profession he knew. Jimmy O'Connell, banished from Major League, did go on and play with the outlaw Copper League, an independent league not affiliated with Major League Baseball. Buck Weaver, Lefty Williams, and Chick Scandle of Black Sox fame, and Hal Chase, a notorious gambler, all played in that outlaw league. Jimmy helped Fort Bayard in New Mexico win the 1926 Copper League Championship. He batted an astronomical league-leading .523 with 12 homers in 38 games. Clearly, Jimmy O'Connell was playing ball at a big league level, and the fans responded by making him one of the most popular players in the league. Jimmy was just as hot in 1927, leading the league in batting in the entirety of the season. Unfortunately, the Copper League went bust at the end of the year, with some teams joining the new Arizona State League. Because this league was affiliated with organized baseball, Jimmy was banned from participating. There was no shortage of calls for the reinstatement of Jimmy O'Connell from respected baseball men such as Cubs owner William Wrigley Jr. and the famed sports writer Damon Runyon. Runyon asked Landis, "Don't you think this boy has been punished enough, Judge? I believe the public would be with you if you reinstate him." Landis stuck to his decision. "If I reinstate O'Connell, I must reinstate the other offending players, and that would be a hard thing to explain." O'Connell was in baseball for 4 years before he committed the offense that resulted in his suspension. He should have known better, Landis said. So poor Jimmy O'Connell, banished from baseball for telling the truth, a naive rookie, ingrained in him when he was young to respect authority and to tell the truth. Well, that's exactly what he did, and he was banished from baseball. What you're looking at is a 1923 strip card, W515-1 of Jimmy O'Connell, outfielder of the New York Giants National League. And it is a strip card, so there's a blank back. But there's the star of our story, of the tragedy, Jimmy O'Connell. Next player in our story, John Henry Heine Sand. And what you're looking at is a 1933 Gaudi R319. And that's the back of it. Heine Sand, the man who would not agree to throw a baseball game. And his later years suffered because he also told the truth. Okay, next involved. Cozy Dolan. And this is 1914 V81 felt blanket. This is from his playing days. He did play with the St. Louis of the National League as well as other teams. Later to become coach of the New York Giants and John McGraw's yes man. Next one involved is Frankie Frisch. And this is a 1934-36 R327 Diamond Stars card. I like this card. I like Diamond Stars. I used to love Gaudies. I still love Gaudies, but I discovered from watching your guys' videos about Diamond Stars, and I really like the artistic graphics in the back of these cards. Very nice. And that's the back of a Diamond Star card. Next one is George High Pockets Kelly. And this is a W516-2-2 strip card. And I like strip cards. Blank back. Now, on the card, it says M. Kelly with an EY at the end. He would be G. Kelly, George High Pockets, with no E, just a Y on the end. There was a pitcher on the Giants at one time, very few innings he pitched, named, I believe it was named Mike Kelly. But this is confirmed to be George High Pockets Kelly. It's just an error that they did M. Kelly instead of G. Kelly. He is a Hall of Famer, as well as Frankie Frisch, a Hall of Famer. George High Pockets Kelly. Strip cards, I like some, I hate others. I hate the ones that are generic faces that don't even look like the player. Like there's one of Babe Ruth that doesn't even look like Babe Ruth. I dislike those very much. But there are some strip cards that do have actual likeness, like the Kelly. And I really like the O'Connell. These are nice strip cards. Next character in our story, Ross Pep Young. And this is a 1961 Fleer Baseball Greats. And Ross Young also went on to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. And that's the back of his card. The authoritative figure in our story, Commissioner Judge Keenshaw Mountain Landis. And this also is a 1961 Fleer Baseball Greats. With the back. And then we got the manager of the Giants. Did he or didn't he know about the bribe? John McGraw. This is a 1909-11 T206. McGraw has a couple of cards, so this one's called Glove at Hip. Beautiful colors on this card. It was this card. I was at a baseball card show in the mid to late 80s. And I was picking up cards to complete like my 1970 collection, holes in my collection. And I saw this card at a table. I said, what is that? And the guy said, tobacco card. And this was the first tobacco card that I ever bought. Now I have a lot of them just because of this card. I really loved studying the cards and looking at the history of the players behind the card. So very glad I picked up this card. This particular one is from American Beauty. Next player in our story, Buck Weaver. The poor third baseman of the 1919 Black Sox did not go along with the fix, but because he didn't tell anyone about it, he was also banished from baseball by Commissioner Mountain Landis. And what you're looking at is a 1910 Oback. Buck Weaver. And finally, the last character in our story that I have a card of. This is a 1914 T213 coupon. Hal Chase Holden Cup. There were many Hal Chase cards, and this one's called Holden Cup. There is a T206 card, exactly the same front, with many different backs to it. This one is a coupon, T13 coupon, issued in 1914. It has same exact picture, but has, come on, it has blue lettering on the bottom instead of black. And of course, the cigarette brand is Coupon Cigarettes. So that's the story of the O'Connell Dolan affair. I hope someone stuck around to the end, even if you did fast forward to the cards. I thank you very much. And those who did listen to the whole thing, I hope it was interesting and you learned something from the history of baseball. Have a great day, everybody.